Good afternoon. Today we'll discuss the MBA first semester research methodology and communications. Next lecture one, research fundamental and terminology and importance of research in management decisions. हा पाठ आपण पाहू. नेक्स्ट आपला थर्ड युनिट आपण पाहणार आहोत. तर आपल्या थर्ड युनिट मध्ये फर्स्ट आपण रिसर्च मेथोडॉलॉजी, त्याच्यानंतर व्हॉट इज मीन बाय रिसर्च, त्याच्यानंतर नेक्स्ट टॉपिक मध्ये इम्पॉर्टन्स ऑफ रिसर्च इन मॅनेजमेंट डिसिजन्स हा पार्ट आपण डिस्कस केला होता. त्याच्यानंतर आज आपण डिफाइनिंग रिसर्च प्रॉब्लेम टॉपिक करूया. In this topic, the problem can be taken by identify the problem accurately. Since when a problem has been clearly and accurately identified, then only research projects can be conducted. Properly define the marketing research problem, set the course of the entire projects, regardless of how well as a research plan is designed and subsequent storage are carried out. If the problem is not correctly financed, research finding could misleading for even dangers. In this chapter, we allow the reader to appreciate the complexity involved in defining a problem by identifying the factors to be considered with the taxonomy. In this unit, main objectives understanding the problem or identification process, third, explaining the purpose of research proposal, and identify the compounds of the research proposal. Defining the research problem. What is mean by research problem? A research problem can be defined as a gap of uncertainty in the decision-making process or executing body of knowledge which inhibits efficient decision-making. Sometimes it's may so happen that there might be multiple reasons for those gaps are identified them and purchasing their solutions on the result of problems. If one wants to solve a problem, one must really know what the problem is. It can be said that a larger part of the problem lies in knowing the what one is trying to do. Said to Claudius, 1969 definition के convenience means research problem might be classified as a simple or complex. Simple Problem are those that are easy to comparison at their compounds and identify relationships are linear and easy to understand. Complex problem talks about inter relationship between answers and subsequently with the concept compounds. Sometimes the relations might be further impacted by the modern effect on external variables as well. For example, effect of job autonomy and organization performance on work institutions at the same time considers in the interaction effect on autonomy and commitment. This might be further different for male and females. These kinds of problems require a model or framework to be developed to define the research approach. Problem identification process. The first process is management decisions problem. Second, decisions with subject experts. And third, review of existing literature. Organization analysis or qualitative survey. Management research problem. तर याच्यामध्ये आपण फर्स्ट त्या ठिकाणी काय करतो आयडेंटिफाय मॅनेजमेंट डिसिजन्स प्रॉब्लेम की त्याचा प्रॉब्लेम काय ह्याच्यावर आपण हे करतो आयडेंटिफाय करायचा त्याच्यानंतर तो जो प्रॉब्लेम जो आहे त्याच्यावर डिस्कस करून तो एक सब्जेक्ट एक्सपर्टकडून हे करायचा त्याच्यानंतर रिव्ह्यू ऑफ लिटरेचर जे असतं याच्यावर आधी कोणी जो स्टडी केला असेल त्याला म्हणतात संदर्भ मराठीत म्हणतात संदर्भ साहित्याचा आढावा म्हणजे त्या प्रॉब्लेमवर जर कोणी आधी रिसर्च केले असेल तर ते आपण त्यांनी काय कम्प्लिमेंट्स वगैरे केल्या तर ते किंवा काही इन्फॉर्मेशन वगैरे दिली असेल त्याचा फ्रेमवर्क काय होता ते स्टडी करायचं नेक्स्ट आहे ऑर्गनायझेशन ॲनालिसिस म्हणजे एखाद्या संस्थेने किंवा तो डेटा जर पब्लिश केला असेल किंवा इंडस्ट्री वगैरेचे असेल तर त्याच्यावरून तो डेटा घेऊन ॲनालिसिस करणं आणि त्याच्यातून क्वालिटेटिव्ह सर्वे हे करणं आणि त्याच्यानंतर मॅनेजमेंट रिसर्च प्रॉब्लेम जो आहे त्याच्या ज्या काही गोष्टी असेल त्या मांडणं नेक्स्ट आहे त्या ठिकाणी रिसर्च प्रपोजल The research proposal is an individual offer to the company or to companies offer to some outside agents like government, etc. to investigate the issue relating to product, service, or any other aspect relating to human resource system or organizations. Broadly speaking, a research proposal encompasses the methodology of conducting the research to solve the formulated research problem. The first research proposal, the first structure आहे the executive summary. Next आहे the ठिकाणी problem details. Third, strategy for solving the problem. Details of research design, allocations of resource, time schedule, cost benefit to organizations. या सात स्टेप त्या ठिकाणी रिसर्च प्रपोजलच्या स्ट्रक्चरमध्ये इन्व्हॉल्व होतात नेक्स्ट आहे त्या ठिकाणी ऑब्जेक्टिव्ह ऑर पर्पज ऑफ रिसर्च प्रपोजल फर्स्ट आपण ऑब्जेक्टिव्ह ऑर पर्पजेस त्या ठिकाणी आपण फर्स्ट आहे त्या ठिकाणी स्पेसिफिक research questions or issues and indicates their importance. Second आहे त्या ठिकाणी helps in understanding the silent accept of the research projects without going into details. And third, indicates the board methodology and plan to conduct the study. And fifth, indicates the finding and applications that might be made from the study and thus assessing the importance as well as the efficiency of the study. Okay. तर आपण त्याच्यानंतर कंपाऊंड्स ऑफ रिसर्च प्रपोजलचं तर कंपाऊंड्स घटक रिसर्च प्रपोजलचे काही फॅक्टर्स किंवा कंपाऊंड्स आहेत तर फर्स्ट आहे त्या ठिकाणी रिसर्च कंपाऊंड्समध्ये टायटल नेक प्रिमिबल और समरी थर्ड इंट्रोडक्शन इन्क्लुडिंग लिटरेचर रिव्ह्यू फोर सजेशन स्ट्रॅटेजी किंवा अप्रोचेस 5 methodology and resource 6. Discuss on the finding and their applicability. 7. Ideology, scope and limitations. A brief write-up on the above items is given as follow. तर आपण कुठलाही रिसर्च त्या ठिकाणी करत असतो किंवा मांडतो त्यावेळेस आपल्याला फर्स्ट आपलं टायटल मेन्शन करणं गरजेचे असते. त्याच्यानंतर ते रिसर्च आपण करणार त्याचा जो आपण म्हणतो सारांश जो आहे ॲब्स्ट्रॅक्ट त्या ठिकाणी द्यायचा असतो. थर्डला आपण त्याची इंट्रोडक्शन जो सब्जेक्ट आहे त्या सब्जेक्टशी रिलेटेड जी काही इंट्रोडक्शन येईल त्याच्यानंतर त्या इंट्रोडक्शनमध्ये आपण लिटरेचर यूज आहे म्हणजे कोणी याच्यावर आपण काय काय संदर्भ साहित्य जे आहे ते आपण अभ्यासले किंवा कोणाचा बेस त्या ठिकाणी घेतला किंवा यूज केला आहे ते आपण त्या ठिकाणी देतो. त्याच्यानंतर सजेस्ट अप्रोचेस सांगतो. त्याच्यानंतर जो काही डेटा वगैरे घेऊ त्याच्यावर आपण जे अनालिसिस करणार असतो तर ती मेथॉलॉजी कुठली यूज करणार आहे त्याचे सोर्स कुठले सोर्स म्हणजे प्रायमरी सोर्स की सेकंडरी सोर्स कोण आपण त्या ठिकाणी डेटा घेणार आहे. त्याच्यानंतर डिस्कस ऑन द फायंडिंग अँड द ॲबिलिटी हे करून त्याच्या परत त्या सब्जेक्टच्या काही स्कोप आणि लिमिटेशन असेल त्या गोष्टी आपण पाहणार आहे. तर रिसर्च टायटल जे आहे ते ठिकाणी कसं असेल द टायटल शुड इंडिकेट द gist or theme of the research. The would include further reading of the proposal with a favorable disclosure towards the proposal. नेक्स्ट स्क्रीनवर जी समरी आहे ती आपण देतो आणि इंट्रोडक्शन मध्ये आपण काय काय देणार असतो तर लिटरेचर रिव्ह्यू डिव्हलन्स अँड नीड फॉर फर्दर स्टडी इश्यू अँड द प्रॉब्लेम्स ऑफ द स्टडी व्हेरिएबल इन्क्लूड्स इन द स्टडी hypothesis author and types research study like exploratory and descriptive. म्हणजे रिसर्च करण्याचे दोन टाइप्स आहे एक्सप्लोरेटरी रिसर्च आणि डिस्क्रिप्टिव्ह रिसर्च. त्याच्यानंतर आपण सजेस्ट स्ट्रॅटेजी अप्रोचेस आहे त्याच्यामध्ये फॉर सोल्विंग द प्रॉब्लेम व्हेरी स्ट्रॅटेजी अँड अप्रोचेस आर नीड अँड कोर्स ऑफ ॲक्शन्स नीड टू specify for solutions of research problem cost and benefit analysis to adopt particular strategy is and are also needs to evaluating while setting course of actions. मेथोडॉलॉजी मध्ये आपण मेथोडॉलॉजी अँड रिसोर्स मध्ये आपण क्वांटिटिव्ह स्टडी अँड क्वालिटिव्ह स्टडी. It should outline the details of the entire process of carrying out the study. Justify for the using a particular method should be provided. It should generally a sense of assurance that the methods are equivalent and in consonance with the purpose of the study. Typical compounds of the methodology are design, sample design, instruments, data collection, statistical analysis. Based on the formations compounds, the resources are to be established and provided in the proposal. This is discussions on the finding and their applicability. Why discuss the finding the specific applicability to the issue? Realize even the such problem should be indicated. And next, it means the scope and limitation. Any other subject is scope and limitation is very important. In this chapter, main summary is research problem is the identification of a gap of certainly executive knowledge. It may be due to one or multiple causes called simple and complex. Problem identification process could be done though discussed with experts, view of existing literature survey, research problem, etc. Research proposal is the board structure, the issue related to the problem. Compounds of research proposal include title, summary, introductions and literature, view, approach methodology, findings, scope and limitations of research. In this chapter, main keywords is research design, resource, cost benefit analysis, hypothesis, equivalence, and statistical analysis. Next chapter is formulation of hypothesis. Research main point is hypothesis. Very must. What is a mean by hypothesis? Some basic concept considered testing and of hypothesis. Types of hypothesis, producer for testing of hypothesis in this study in this unit. We shall study some problem where the decisions making by decisions makers depends mainly on the strength of events thrown up by a random sample drawn from a populations. We can elaborate this with an example where the purpose manager of machine tool making has to decide whether to buy costing from a new supplier or not. The new supplier claims that his uh, costing have higher hardness than those of the competitors. If the claim is true, then it would be in the interest of the company to switch from the existing suppliers to the new suppliers because of the higher hardness. All other conditions being similar. However, if the claim is not true, the purchase manager should continue to buy from the existing suppliers. He needs a tool which allows him to test such a claim. Chapter main objective is first is understand the formulations of hypothesis. Second, understand the concept of hypothesis testing. Learn the process of hypothesis testing. Examine the purpose of hypothesis testing. जर आपले हायपोथिक्स फिक्स असेल तर आपण हायपोथिक्सच्या आधारे आपण ऑल ओव्हर जे रिसर्च त्या ठिकाणी करत असतो आणि हायपोथिस जी आहे ती चूज कशी करायची असतात तर आपला सब्जेक्ट जे डेटा आहे त्याचे लिमिटेशन्स आपल्या रिसर्चचे काय लिमिटेशन्स आहे तो डेटा त्या ठिकाणी कसा भेटेल त्याच्यानुसार आपण हायपोथिस चूज करायचे असतात तर our hypothesis for the example situation in 4.2 point one could be that the means hardness of casting to be used in automobile. New supplier claims that its costing have more hardness than 20 CHN. Our hypothesis for the example situations in 4.2.1 could be that the means hardness of casting supplied by the new supplier is less than or equal to 20, where 20 is the mean hardness of casting suppliers by exiting suppliers. To action decisions problem. The decisions problem faced by the purchase manager in 4.1 above has only two alternative course of actions, either to buy from the new supplier or not to buy from the new supplier. The alternative choose depends on whether the claim made by the new supplier is accepted or rejected. Now, the claim made by the new supplier can be formatted as a statistical hypothesis has been done in 4.1 above. Therefore, the decisions made on the alternative choose depends mainly or whether a hypothesis is accepted or rejected. Some basic concepts considering testing of hypothesis. First type is hypothesis, null hypothesis. Null hypothesis means, as a starter earlier, hypothesis is a statement about population parameter or about a population's distributions. In any testing of hypothesis problem, we are faced with the pair of hypotheses such that one and only one of them is always true. One of this pair is called the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis is represented as H0 and the alternative hypothesis is respected as H1. For example, if the population is represented by the we can set our hypothesis as follows: H2 equal to 20. This point. Null hypothesis is called by this name because in many situations acceptations of this hypothesis would lead to null actions. For example, if our purchase manager accept the null hypothesis, he would continue to buy casting from the existing supplier except the null hypothesis. He would continue to buy casting from the existing suppliers and so such quota and would be maintained. On the other hand, rejecting the null hypothesis would lead to a change in situation quota and the purchase is to be made by the new suppliers. व्हायचे परत त्या ठिकाणी null hypothesis हे केलंय status of population हे कसं हे केलं जातं ते सांगितलंय. नेक्स्ट आपण त्या ठिकाणी पाहणार आहोत जे हायपोथेसिस आहे सिग्निफिकन्स हायपोथेसिस त्या ठिकाणी कसे मेन्शन केले जाते त्यांना डायग्राम वर त्या ठिकाणी दाखवले आणि टेस्टिंग hypothesis suffers from the limitations that the financial or the economics cost of the considerations are not considered explicitly. It practice the significance level is supposed to be arrived at after consider the cost of consideration. It is very difficult to specify the ideal value of in any specific situations. We can only give guidelines that the higher the difference in the cost between type 1 year and type 2nd year, the greater is the importance of types 1 year as compared to type 2nd year. Consequently, the risk of probability of type 1 year should be lower. Types of hypothesis. First types are descriptive hypothesis. So such hypothesis related is related to an assumptions or statement relating to a populations. For example, average life of light was manufacturing by a factory is 22,500 hours. The percentage of a new bench of students joining a management institute having more than 1 years of work experience is 20%. Average mileage of a brand of car is 15 kilometers per liters. Next hypothesis types are relational hypothesis. Relation hypothesis means such hypotheses are considered with the studying or analysis relationship to correlations between two variables characteristics or more than two variables characteristics of a population. Thus, such hypotheses are of two prior types versus casual or co-relational. These are explained as follows. Casual or experimental hypothesis means Resolution hypothesis त्या ठिकाणी parts पडतात. Casual or experimental hypothesis, second आहे correlational hypothesis, and the correlation hypothesis means such hypotheses are used when we want to test whether there is any correlations between two variables. आणि causal or experimental hypothesis means such hypothesis encompass situations where we study the impact of influence of one factors or some other factors. The variable which cause or influence changing is called depend. Like producer of or testing hypothesis. तर त्याच्या steps आहेत ठिकाणी. तर by now it should be clear that there are basically two phases of testing of hypothesis. In the first phase, second phase, third stage, fourth, and fifth. In this chapter, my summary is in this unit we have seen how test considering statistical hypothesis can be designed and use a statistical hypothesis is a statement about a population parameter about the population's distributions. So these tests are considered on the basis of events by by sample errors cannot to totally eliminate, but tests are designed to the questions and answers. It's the simple even strong enough to reject the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis and the alternate hypothesis are set up such that one of them and only one of them is always true with the absence of a strong evidence to the country, the decision maker would be willing to accept the null hypothesis. All tests of hypothesis are considered in two phases. In first phase, test is designing where we decide as to when can the null hypothesis be rejected, and in the second phase, the design test is used to draw the conclusions. Next topic is research design. डिझायनिंग आणि त्याचा आराखडा आपण कसा करतो, जे काही रिसर्च आपण करणार आहोत त्याच्या स्टेप त्या ठिकाणी कशा प्रकारे वापरणार आहे, तर ते आपण त्या रिसर्च डिझायनिंग टॉपिकमध्ये युनिटमध्ये स्टडी करणार. त्याच्यामध्ये व्हॉट इज मीन बाय रिसर्च डिझायनिंग, क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ रिसर्च डिझायनिंग, एक्सपर्ट स्टडीज अँड स्टेप स्टडी आपण पाहणार आहोत. The difficult problem that follows the task of defining the research problem is the preparations of the design of the research projects, properly known as the research designing, and understand of the fundamental of the research designing and its compounds enables the researchers to formulate a design that is operate from the problem at hand. A research designing is the arrangement of conditions for collections and analysis of data in a manner that aims to combine relevance to the research purpose with economics in production. In this unit, main objective, understanding the research design process, understand the classifications of the research design, and third, learn the various research studies. What is meant by research design? Research design is a framework or blueprint for conducting the research study. It details the process necessary for obtaining the information needed to structure or solve business research problems. The research design specific the details of conducting the research projects. A good research design ensures research projects we consider effective and efficient. Usually involves the following compounds. First is defining the formations name, designing the exploratory and descriptive causal phase or research, specify the measurements and scaling techniques, for constructions and pre-testing of questionnaires, specifying the appropriate form of data collection, specify sampling process and sample size, developing the plan for data analysis. Research design an activity and time-based plan. A plan always based on the research question, a guide for selecting source and type of information, a framework for specify the relationship among the study variable, a procedural outline for every research activity. Then the classification of research design. The classification of research design चे तो एक one आहे category आणि दुसरा आहे types. Category में the degree to which Question has been fertilized. Any types exploratory study and formal study. Extract the topical scope, depth and depth of the study. Second is a statistical study. Third आहे त्या ठिकाणी the purpose of the study, descriptive causal. Fourth आहे त्या ठिकाणी the power of the researchers to produce effects in the variable under study. त्याचा टाइप्स आहे एक्सटिपेंसी एक्स पोस्ट आणि नेक्स्ट आहे त्या ठिकाणी the method of data collection, monitoring, questionnaires and communication, the research environment, field setting, laboratory setting and simulations. On the basis of the power of research to produce effective variables. On the basis of the time dimensions cross-sectional studies. Cross-sectional studies involve the collections of information from any given sample of populations elements only once. They can be single cross-sectional and multi-cross-sectional. In the single cross-sectional, only one sample of response is drawn from the target populations and information obtained from this sample only once. This design can be also be called a sample survey research design. Sample survey research design means, in a single cross section, only one sample of the response is drawn from the target populations and information is obtained from the this sample only one person is called as a sample survey research design. Next hypothetical. In multiple cross-section designing, there are two or more sample of response and information from each sample is obtained only once. The first is longitudinal studies. Longitudinal studies means longitudinal design involves a fixed sample of population movements that its measures repeatedly. The sample remains the same over time, thus providing a series of pictures which when viewed together properly vivid installations of the situations and the change that are taking place over time. Next hypothetical, exploratory studies. The objective of an exploratory research is to explore research to a problem or situations to provide insight and understanding. Exploratory research could be used for any of other following purpose: formulating a problem or defining a more accurately, second, identify different course of action, third, development of hypotheses, fourth, identifying key variables and the relationship for further testing, gain insight for developing an approach to the problem, establishing probabilities of for further research. Exploratory techniques, there are three exploratory techniques. First is the qualitative analysis of the secondary data. Second, experience survey, one type within the categories of individual interviews. And third, focus groups, one type within a category of group interview. Okay, the descriptive means to describe something. The major objective of the descriptive research is also to describe something, normally market characteristics or market functions. Descriptive means that to describe something. The major objective of descriptive research is also to describe something, normally market characteristics or market functions. Descriptive research in consult to exploratory research involves clear statement of the problem, specific hypothesis, and detailing information is example market study which describe the size of the market, availability of distributors, buyers, powers, and consumer their profit profiles. Second, market share studies which try to know the proportion of the sales of one company and the other competitors. Third, sales analysis studies which describe sales by product lines, geographic regions, etc. Fourth, the image study which determine consumer prescriptions of the firms and their product. And fourth, other example are advertising study, pricing studies, distribution studies, etc. Descriptive research is characterized by the prepared formulations of specific hypotheses. Thus, the information need is clearly defined. Therefore, descriptive research is frame, plan, and structure. It is usually based on a larger representative sample. There is a formal research design which specifies the method for selecting the resource or information and collecting data from those sources. Descriptive design requires clear specifications of who, what, where, when, why, and where. Six way W's of research. Six W's way to first who, what, where, when, why, and where of research. Casual study means the correlations between a less satisfied person in bank and probability of switching to another bank seems to be a good proof to some, but good researcher will not be believe that it is a cautions because two things change together does not imply a cause and effect relationship. For example, the straw populations and human birth rate have both been in Europe for the last 50 years. In this chapter, main summary is the research is a systematic framework or blueprint for conducting the research study. It includes the specific details or process necessary for the research project. Research design is classified in many categories, research types including exploratory, formal study, case statistical analysis, descriptive casual, experimentally exposed of monitoring, questionnaire, cross-sectional, longitude, and field sets simulations. In this chapter, mainly two terms are exploratory studies, descriptive studies, cross-sectional study, and longitude studies. Which one happened? Next we need to just experimental design. Experimentally designing. What is mean by experimentations? Various concept of definitions, consulting of experimentability of experimentations, classification of experimental design, etc. तर याच्यामध्ये आपण ह्या टॉपिक मध्ये अभ्यास केला experimentations means an experiment is a study involving interventions by the research behind that required for measurements. The usually interventions used to manipulate some variable in a setting and observe how it affects the participants or subjects being study, people or physical entities. The researchers multiplies the independence or explore the variables and then observe whether the hypothesis different variable as affected by the interventions. An example of such as interventions is a related experiment based on a famous study by bystanders and cues in the experiment. Participants are invited to come to a new store where they have an opportunity to see someone steal the purpose of another customer looking at merchants on a nearby display. Confidence of experimenter, of course, at the rows of the accused shopper at the theme. As in the original study, the major hypothesis concerns here whether people observing the thief are more like to report. First one is if they are alone when they observe the crime, and second if they are in the company after some time is. Various concept of definitions. Independent variables. Independent variables means variables or alternatives that are manipulated and whose effects are measured and compared. These variables are also known as treatments. Example: price level, advertising theme, package, designing. Test units are individuals, organizations, or other entities whose response to the independent variables of treatment is being examined. Example of the test units can be consumer, geographic areas, or stores. Depend variables are the variable which measures the effect of the independent variable on the test units. Example: sales, profits, and market shares. External variables are all variables other than the independent variable that affect the response of the test units. Example: store size, store locations, and comparative efforts. Experimentally meant. Experimentally is a form when researchers multiplies one or more ideas and measures their effect on one or more different variables at the same time. Effect of external variables is controlled. Experimental design is a set of procedures specifying a testing, uh, the test unit and how these units are to be divided into homogeneous subsamples. What independent variable or treatments are to be manipulated, what dependent variable are to be measured, and how the expense variables are to be controlled. Next, conducting an experiment. Accountability of oil experimentation happen or research usually um, has two very important goals. First goal is probability conclusions about the effect of a independent variable on the study. Make generalizations to a larger populations or interest. The first course is related to internal validity and the second to external validity. Internal validity it refers to whether the manipulations of the independent variable actually cause the observed efforts on the dependent variables. Thus, the internal validity examines say that the observed effects on the test units could have been caused by variables other than the treatment. Next, externality it refers to whether to cause and effect relationship on the experiment could be generalized. This externality examines whether the results can be relation behind the experimental situations, and if so, that populations, time setting, different variables and different variables. Can the results be projected? Both types of validity and describe in experimental design. But usually in business users, we have to try one type of validity. Next is classifications of experimental design. Pre-experimental design means this design do not employ recombinations producer to control for external factors. Example of these designs are one short case study, the one group, test process design, and the strategic group. Second, experimental design is this design the researchers can randomly assign phases and treatments to experimental groups. This design includes pre-test, post-test control group design, post-test only control group design, and the Solomon 4 groups design. For 6-month design, designing that the plan is part of the producer of true explanations but lack full experimental control. Example of such design are time series and multiple time series designs. And for statical design, a statical design is a series of basic experiments that allows for statical control and analysis for external variables. Important statical designs are randomized black design, lattice square design, and factor design. This chapter main summary is the experimental study knows in interventions by the research behind that required for measurements. The aims is to identify the effect on the dependent variable to change in the independent variable. This could be studied by performing experiments and evaluating effects on different situations. Conducting the experiments follow a sequentially process. It involves the selections of relevant variable specifications of the levels controlling the experimental environment. In choosing the design, selecting and assigning the participants for testing and analysis. Evaluations of the experiment is two types called internal and external validations. Experimental design is classification into experimental, true experimental, quasi experimental design, and statical design. This sixth chapter is completed. Next lecture is over. नेक्स्ट लेक्चरला आपण 7 चॅप्टर जो आहे तो स्टडी करणार आहे मेथड ऑफ डेटा कलेक्शन्स. थँक्यू.
Thank you, ma'am.